Go ahead. Okay. Are we live now?
We are live.
Okay. Happy Sunday. Hello. It feels a little weird today, I think, to talk about miles and points with not just coronavirus, but the current situation in our country. But we will try to make the best of it as much as one can at this point. Thank you guys for joining us. Tiffany, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be useless. I'm having a slight technical difficulty because I'm sitting on my laptop and I somehow have minimized
it's only me
the
there.
wrong
That's
things.
okay.
Yeah. Good morning.
Yeah.
I am actually here.
Yes, but
yes, that was the whole thing. Like I minimized the wrong screen, so I was like, how can I not add myself to the live stream? So welcome once again to 1 Mile at a Time's weekly edition of how to live stream a live stream, where we provide not necessarily tips, but examples of how not to do it.
It's not our area collectively of expertise, but you do a pretty good job with it.
Right. People who need an intern.
Okay, you're there now. Okay, I see the delay.
I'm here now.
Yes, so I mean, this is in general one of the things about when you write a blog about a niche topic, and you can recognize that, like for example, any changes happening at airlines aren't actually important in the grand scheme of things. I mean, obviously layoffs, that stuff is important, but like catering changes don't matter. I find them interesting, for example, because like this has always been my interest and hobby and passion, but of course at certain times that feels more appropriate than others. And I think just with everything going on right now, it's kind of just so yes.
Yeah.
But we can still do miles and points stuff.
I appreciate you acknowledging that. I think it's hard because like there's a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, you're so tone deaf. And it's like, it's not that we don't know, we're doing this over here a little separately.
And it's tough to find the right balance there, because I totally recognize that. At the same time, people go to certain places for certain reasons, and presumably people are coming to 1 Mile at a Time because they want a distraction, and that's what they want to read about, not because, whatever. So I will try to, yes. But that doesn't change these things that are happening, and that it sucks, but, and that, we should do stuff, but,
I like that we should do stuff. I mean,
so yes, where are you? Oh yes, you're in your fireplace. You're sitting across from your desk, basically, right, Tiffany?
Yeah, I am. It'd be creepy if you hadn't been to my house, but yeah, like I am sitting, my very messy desk is over there. Generally I would sit in the kitchen for brunch, but, it wasn't going to happen today.
Good. Okay. So, anyway.
So, we said today that what we wanted to do was talk about actually redeeming miles, and if people want to like join in and have us go through and like, here's how we would book that trip. That might be ambitious for today, but if somebody wants to do that, like wave your hand or let us know, and you'll just need to join us on Skype or just tell us a trip that you want to do, and Ben can dazzle us with his screen sharing skills and do that. But in the meantime, someone is talking about doing ANA business class round trip from the US to Singapore, or Singapore first class from Tokyo to. I don't understand all these options, but
ANA business
like
class round trip,
none of them get you where you necessarily need to go. So it seems like this is just an airplane ride. Tweet.
First class. Yeah. So that's it. I like the question. I'm just confused because how do you go the other way? Because comparing a round trip ticket from the US to Singapore is different than how do you compare that in business class on Singapore to a one-way ticket from Singapore to New York? Well, I mean, all else being equal on a particular segment, I would choose Singapore first class or Singapore suites on the A380 from Singapore to Frankfurt to New York over, Singapore business from Newark to Singapore, or over ANA business class. But depends how many miles you have, where you're trying to go. I mean, ANA's new business class is incredible, so that's an opportunity. the nonstop flight from Newark to Singapore, that's cool for the novelty of it, flying that long. I don't need to do it again. But if you would like to experience a plane where you keep thinking, like, doesn't this thing ever run out of fuel? Like, how is this still flying? Then that's an option. Yeah.
Was that how you felt?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible when the plane keeps flying. And it's like, though I guess the thing about that flight is it's basically darkness the whole way when I took it, which is not as weird as when you have a flight where you have two different sunsets. That to me is what gets me when it's like, okay, you take off in daylight, it's sunset, it's day again, another sunset, and you're still flying. So those are the best. So that's
awesome. Okay, what if somebody, what, did you have what?
I was just looking at Robert's comment about controversial opinion. I think that's an interesting.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
You have your fancy way of putting it up there, so
I did.
Okay, great. So controversial opinion, says Robert. The premium for first over business isn't that great if there's no booze and all the food's on a single tray, or if it's a snack box and bottle of water. So I agree on the surface, except I think it depends what the airline is, because, space is the new luxury, right? So that's if first class gets you a suite with a door, that is safer, and potentially you can probably sleep better if you're in that environment. So I think, yeah, obviously in some ways the process of flying as such probably isn't going to be as fun as it used to be, because, with soft products being devalued, it's just not as fun. It's truly a form of transportation now. But I think there is a big difference if you can at least be in comfort, have a door. So I guess it's how much. The question is how big of a premium it is. But if I were traveling alone, I would want to avoid, for example, business class products where you're seated next to a stranger, 232 or whatever. So I think there's a value to a private-ish seat.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I mean, that's on the same lines as like talking about Turkish's box lunches, for business class. Like, does that? I mean, at that point, like Sean M said a couple of weeks ago, like no matter what you book right now, you're getting premium economy.
At best, in some cases, it seems. Yeah, it's and that's the thing. I don't know where the correct point is for the line to be drawn with what service airline should be offering. I mean, I've said long that I think minimizing contact makes a lot of sense as much as possible. Where should that line be drawn on a 15-hour flight? Does that mean should airlines have zero service? Should they, Turkish is now handing you a closed snack box so the crew never touches it at all? Or is the risk reasonable to say that, we'll serve you everything on one tray and there will be hot food, but like the crew will be interacting with it more? So I don't know where that line is right now. I think over time it'll be telling in a few years what airlines are back to where they were before and what airlines aren't, at least in a post-COVID world, if there is such a thing. Yeah, that's new food is a bit particular.
Yeah. Okay. So just a couple questions for people who are watching. Okay, never mind. That one makes sense. So if Charles is looking at doing San Francisco to Paris for 30th of April next year on United for $60K. They feel like that's a decent deal. What other options?
I mean, that's for United Metal, a very good price. I assume they have that nonstop if that sticks around. So, I mean, 60,000, if you can get a saver nonstop from the West Coast to the city in Europe you want to go to, I mean, for all I care, it could be, Ukraine International Airlines old 767, and that would be a good option because you can't be going direct. Maybe not quite that, but they're 777 maybe. But I'd say that's a pretty good value. I'm not, the alternatives you could redeem on a Star Alliance partner, and it would cost 10,000 plus more miles. I mean, now they added 10%, so whatever more it is, but I'm not sure it's worth it because Lufthansa business isn't actually good. Swiss is okay. I like Turkish, but
Turkish. TAP is starting soon, right?
Yes, I mean, but I would just go direct, especially because I would expect that it's going to be a while till flying as such is fun again, or where we see flying not be a masked experience that's less pleasant than like all the travel I'm thinking of in the coming year or two. Not once am I like, oh, which airline product am I excited to fly? I'm thinking, okay, where do I want to go and how can I get there as efficiently and comfortably and privately as possible in terms of a door or something? Because I do think a 14-hour flight is a lot more enjoyable if you're not sitting right next to someone, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're right next to someone. Even like the honeymoon seats that like Etihad and Alitalia have, whatever, spout off whatever aircraft it is that has that. Um, that's why we have you here on this, right?
It's
It's some kind of Airbus. It has, anyways, they're not like super comfortable for a really long trip or a really long
right.
flight, right? Like, even if, and that's with like someone who you like and want to spend time with, like
Yeah.
eventually, like I don't know how you and Ford did it because Nick and I flew one of those on a short segment.
Yeah. You did Doha to
Milan,
Paris, I think.
no, Milan to Abu Dhabi
Ah,
on Etihad on that. And I
yeah.
was like, I hated him by the time we got off the plane. Like, your knees are in my space, your elbows are in my space, so.
It is not comfortable, not at all. And it's and okay. Well, can you're a pretty good sleeper, Tiffany, even upright, based on observing you on planes. So where do you stand on? Could you on a long haul flight? Could you sleep? Could you get as good of a night's sleep as you did before with a mask on? Or
Yeah, I don't think that the mask would make a difference. The thing about my sleeping is interesting. Like I think because I grew up in a plane, basically, from a very young age when I was a child. And so the being upright and against the fuselage, I think just the vibration and the sounds, like there's something to that, and then I will fall asleep. Like I am more likely to fall asleep upright on a 737 on a 1 hour flight. Like I will be asleep before the landing gear is retracted and I won't, I'll sleep all the way through. But on a plane where like there's a lie flat seat, if my feet are constrained at all and it's claustrophobic or it's hot, I just won't sleep all night. So I feel like the mask is so far down the list of factors.
well, but does the mask make you feel warmer? Like, for example, if there's not an individual air nozzle,
Probably.
because I can only sleep in sort of perfect circumstances, no matter whether it's on the ground or in the air. And so I'm fully prepared. Whatever flight I take, my expectation is I'm not going to be able to sleep, and I'm sort of planning accordingly in terms of like I want to get where I'm going as quickly as possible when I fly because
Yeah.
it doesn't seem particularly
My thing
important.
is I think I'm so much more light and noise sensitive than probably
Yeah.
the average person. So even like with earplugs in and an eye mask on, which like you have to do on like a nylon, otherwise you're murderous when you get off the end. I still don't sleep well because there's inevitably someone who ordered, whatever beef dish took an hour to prepare, and they're clanking their silverware 3 hours prior to arrival.
And in general, I mean, all these airlines offering dine on demand, it is a blessing and a curse because there's constantly noise in the galley. There's the smell of the food, which I have a hard time with, but
Yeah.
it's yeah.
So let's see. Paul, who is looking at going to Bora Bora, can you give us some dates of when you're looking at going, or if this is just a theoretical conversation? But if you give us some dates, we can look at it. That'd be fun. Yeah, it's sort of fun, like people who are chiming in, like, oh, you need to learn the art of sleeping on the jump seat, or people who have slept on a C-130. I do think at some level it's almost easier to sleep sitting up without the expectations. Like when it's, oh, here's the mattress pad, and here's this whole thing, and here's the
Yeah.
pillow mints, and it's like that's now too much pressure, and I actually can't sleep.
That's true because I feel like a total idiot when I can't sleep, even though I have a flat bed, because I'm like, how much of a
Right.
princess am I? But sometimes I can doze off a little bit if it's a sitting up, at least you don't expect you're going to be very comfortable. So then it's a pleasant surprise when it does happen.
Yeah, and then there's the whole like if you're on a carrier where their version of safety is having an announcement in 19 languages. Like Royal Air Maroc was actually the worst for that because they had the very European convention of the ding is not enough. We need to announce that we have turned on the seatbelt sign. And of course, they have to do it in Arabic, in French, and English. And like at that point in time, you're almost landed because you made so many dang announcements.
The three language airlines that gets me. It's true Air Canada. If you're flying anywhere that's not the French speaking or English speaking, you get English, French, and whatever country you're going to, and it's a lot.
Yeah. So, do you want to show us how you would look for flights to Bora Bora from New York? This is the best one to start out with because it's super unsatisfying.
Unfortunately, in this case, it's quite straightforward for better or worse. We can, but it's probably going to lead to disappointment.
I mean, I think the visual is nice because I think what happens is sometimes people think like that they're doing something wrong,
Right.
and so they can't find space or blah blah blah. But like that's not
I'll
the
probably
case.
screw it up in the process, but we'll give it a try. Why not? How do you add me though?
So if you screen share.
Okay. So in Skype?
Mhm.
Or,
Yeah, it looks like two windows overlapping each other.
Okay. Is this going to work in terms of, because it's our boxes are.
Yeah, all drop out. Like if we had 4 people on, it would all be fine. Like, yeah, Howie and I
Oh,
tested the ratios of this. So I will still be here on audio, but you won't see my lovely
okay.
pajamas
So
and bedhead.
start. Is this working?
It is, yes.
Okay, so
So we can see
Tahiti.
your American screen.
Yes, that's the goal for now. So wait a second. Now I'm stupid. AA.com, they do show Air Tahiti's face. Air Tahiti Nui. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So you can zoom out a little bit, would be helpful if you can do like command minus minus on that. Perfect.
Better? Okay.
Look at you go.
So for getting to Tahiti or Papeete, you have two real best options with miles. You have either Air France or you have Air Tahiti Nui. So the best website for searching award space on Air Tahiti Nui would be American's website. Even though they have the new calendar function, it's still the best option. So first, I would search just from LAX because I know that the nonstop flights to Tahiti are going to be from LAX on Air France and Air Tahiti Nui. So that's easier because we can probably find a connecting flight domestically otherwise. But first, we'll start here. So what did we say? April?
Yeah, April of next year. I mean, Paul, you're being smart about it and trying to book this a full year out because space is really difficult.
We'll say probably 2 people because most people don't go to Tahiti alone.
Oh, Ben, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Oh, sorry.
Well, now we can. We couldn't hear you when you were muttering it yourself, so maybe that was
I think I had literally put my hand over the mic. That was very smart. Just my luck. Okay, so we're in the calendar function here. We're searching. Oh, great. No flights available in business, but that might just be a glitch here. Let's see. So I'm just using the calendar. Oh, great. No flights available. But what is this? So 80,000, is this the round trip? If so, that's economy. Let's just see. Oh, yeah. Okay, I have a lot to say in a second about premium economy. The fact that, this alleged pricing, we'll get into that in a minute. But now it could be that American's website is glitching. In which case, should we first go to Expert Flyer, Tiffany, and
yeah, we can check Expert Flyer.
Expert. Okay, here we go.
I can do the command minus minus just so it fits in nicely.
Okay. So let's just make sure I'm checking this because sometimes American's website is not actually that accurate. So we'll go here and I'm just entering dates in April. I can search 7 days at a time and we'll see Air Tahiti Nui Business Award. That's F. Now, if you call American, that could be a challenge, but we'll get into that in a bit. Let's see here. F0, F0, F0. Yeah, it's not looking very good. American's calendar might have been correct. So now you can go to Auckland. Okay, see, here's 1 seat from Papeete to LA. That doesn't help you with multiple seats.
I mean, I suppose it does if you don't like your family.
Well, here you go. Okay, there are a couple of dates. Look at this. So this has 2.
Coming back?
On the way back.
Yeah, it is tiny, so you've got to maybe tell people what you can see.
So yeah, from on April 12th. So I would suggest, writing down the flight number, the date, and the fare class. They use different fare classes than the other One World airlines because they're not in One World. So when you call American, you might have to specifically prompt them, say that I think their business class award bucket is the F bucket because that way they know what to look up. Now, from a value perspective, I know I'm nuts, but one thing I would consider, I hate how it's a 7.5-hour flight from LA to Tahiti, and that costs 80,000 miles in business. If I were going to Tahiti, I would consider you could fly from Tokyo to Tahiti on Air Tahiti Nui. This doesn't actually help anyone get from the US, but the point is I think it's 45,000 one-way business class, and it's 50% further. So if you could find a cheap flight, for example, to Japan and want to combine a vacation in Japan with Tahiti, which I'm sure is exactly what you were thinking when you started planning this, they actually have very good award availability there. So just to show how fun that could be.
This is why we don't have Ben help clients at Points Pros anymore. Yeah. He's like, how about instead of Bora Bora, you go to Tokyo?
Who wouldn't want to?
Well, I mean, there is something to be said for that, because especially people on the East Coast, like we have a lot of conversations about, like, I know it doesn't seem like the better option, but you should just connect in Asia on your way to the South Pacific, because it's better planes, it's more comfortable, and like you could do New York to Tokyo, maybe do a ANA award through Virgin Atlantic, and then tag on and go to Bora Bora.
I just like to point out here, 3 business class award seats per day, basically, Tokyo to Tahiti. Longer flight and only, I think, 90,000 round trip, which is a phenomenal deal. So versus 90,000 round trip versus 160 round trip. So it is an option. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but every time I've thought of going to Tahiti, other than the time I went, I've always thought, I'm like, but that Tokyo flight really is a better value. So
and that's sort of the thing. Like from LA, it is only a 7-hour flight. It's not, it feels like it should be much further than Hawaii, but it really isn't. So what is that new airline flying there that has really reasonable French B? Like, I would consider, you're not going to sleep anyway, because the flight leaves at midnight from LA, and like just the timings are not great for sleeping. So I would consider just buying.
So there are probably some dates that have availability LA Tahiti. Searching Expert Flyer, they showed up. They didn't show up on American's website, so I would keep looking there. Otherwise, I would consider going out of Tokyo. Or let's see if Air France has anything. Usually they don't, but keep an eye on, maybe it's just worth doing an economy award because it's not that long, or premium economy, which is still better than not. It is now mandatory to, okay, that's not important right now. So let's just see here. So I'm just going here.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just pointing out that French B also flies from San Francisco, so it gives you a couple more options.
Yeah, I think they only do San Francisco. I don't even think they're the only one that doesn't do LA. So let's see here. So flights around these dates, going for a flexible search, business class, find a flight.
And to Danielle, you do need a premium membership with Expert Flyer to do what Ben was doing just then. But again, like all that information, at this point, there's very little information at Expert Flyer that can't be accessed via a public source. So, or another source, it's not Expert Flyer. So unless you're flying a lot to where like you get the seat alerts and things like that, I don't know that it's as valuable as it used to be.
Yep. So here we have the cheapest, as you can see, most dates one way is 384,000, which is a little bit steep, but one day has 94,500. This is for business, but then I would look at, United has one as well. That's true if it returns. So 8 hours 40. I would go back and I would also look at premium economy. But I think in general, my approach would be Air Tahiti Nui. And if that's not an option, Air France is unlikely to have anything. Yeah. And I might just end up paying to fly French B. But let me just take a look here at premium economy if there's anything decent there.
And premium economy on that particular aircraft for Air France is like, it's nice. I mean, it's like business class was 10 years ago. So it's not uncomfortable, especially for a short flight like this.
51,000 is not terrible in premium economy. But, in other markets, there's a lot more creativity that I could have used. But when you have just 2 airlines flying nonstop, the creativity here is limited to going through Tokyo, which triples your travel time roughly, which in the COVID era does not sound particularly enjoyable. But So 51,000 might not be that bad. Otherwise, I'd look at revenue fares. Air Tahiti Nui does, I believe, do paid upgrades. Day of departure that are not crazy in terms of the pricing. So that could be a good option. Here, I'm going to go back to how do I do this? Share.
You just did it. You just stopped sharing the screen. You're
Oh,
sharing me. That was awkward. Okay.
Well, now, okay. There we go. Sorry.
That's
So
okay.
anyway, that's one example. But
I think that was helpful. That was helpful.
we could have gone to other dates and stuff. But and then United would be the other one to check out. Except I'm not sure that's in the schedule yet for next. Let's see what they actually fly. Like, that's the thing, is you could book United now, but realistically, if they end up canceling the route, which they very well may, I think all of these cool new routes that have been launched in the past few years, or a lot of them at least, are going to go away. They would probably tell you just to go to hell if they cancel the flight, because they don't, they're unlikely to reroute you via Auckland on Air New Zealand, / you probably won't want to do that anyway.
Right, and they don't have, it's not a situation where they have a partner that they can just put you on instead, which is sometimes what happens, right? Like, the flight was canceled, but like American and British Airways are really good about this. Our flight was canceled, but we can put you on our partner flight. And United is really good about that with Lufthansa flights. Oh, we'll just do that.
Yes. That's fun now, so it's not bad. That's true.
Susan is asking if you could do a West Coast to Buenos Aires.
Oh, that's a fun one. Okay, so
Copa is for you, Susan.
Yeah, so West Coast of Buenos Aires, I'll just say, either go to united.com and look up Copa award availability, because they sometimes have good availability. Keep in mind, if you do business class, you're not going to get a flatbed unless their maxes are flying again. It's going to be like domestic first class. It's a 737. That's all they have. Very efficient, not very comfortable. Otherwise, American does sometimes have award availability, including web special awards in business class, which could be a great deal, but that's going to be through Dallas or Miami. And you might have to... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I would also look at Aeromexico. If you're in an Aeromexico served city, because they do have a flatbed. But the problem is connecting in Mexico City is like connecting in the US, which means it's terrible. Like, there's no airside transit. So you have to enter Mexico. Like, it's a whole thing.
Mexico transit is not fun at all.
Yeah. Though if you happen to be in San Diego, you can just walk over to Tijuana, and then you can do Tijuana, Mexico City, Buenos Aires. That would all be on the 7/8. That'd be nice. That was good. I mean, looking here, I am loving Michelle here, who's saying that she went to Tahiti via LA, Taipei, Hong Kong, Singapore, Sydney, Auckland to Tahiti, just so she could hit all the buttons with the flights. Oh, it was your honeymoon. You're a brave woman.
All the more fun.
Yeah.
All positive memories in this era. So.
Yeah. So I think, Susan, you're adding in saying like you'd want to do lie flat to Buenos Aires. It's a tough market. There's not a lot of premium demand on those routes to where there's nice products. So your options are pretty limited. Trying to think if there's anything that we're missing. Like, you can spend 1 million Sky Miles.
I mean, maybe LATAM from LA to Lima to Buenos Aires. It's tough to find multiple seats.
They haven't had award space for like years, though.
Yeah,
so that might be a situation where if you have something really specific like that, like you only want one stop, would be to look at paying for tickets and doing something like, if you have the business platinum Amex, booking through Amex Travel, because sometimes there's a discount on premium airfare, and then you basically get 1.35 cents per point. No, you're getting like
1.53 if you're doing the discount thing.
You get a 35% points rebate when you redeem the Amex points for the airfare. So combined with the discount in travel pricing to start with, and then the points rebate, that can actually be fewer points than what you would pay otherwise, and you're not as limited by award availability.
And Euro's right. Also, there is Avianca, which they're in Chapter 11 right now, but I mean, they're likely to go back, and they fly LA to Bogota to Buenos Aires, or wherever in West Coast they were coming from. They fly to multiple cities there, so that can be a good option. if they have
I'm not sure
space.
I've
And
ever seen a word space on that route though.
LA to Bogota?
No, Bogota onwards.
Hmm.
LA to
I think the
Bogota
connecting
sometimes.
times are bad.
Yeah, LA to Bogota sometimes, but I think you do have to connect. It's like a 22-hour connection in
Yeah, some of their
Bogota, which is
scheduling is
maybe
not ideal.
fine. Have you heard back from your Qatar Airways status match? Did you do that or
I didn't
no?
have eligible status, but I mean, I would expect them to be pretty inconsistent and maybe not terribly organized when it comes to. Um, Sean Emmett did the status match.
Yeah.
Good job. Well, I love when they were like, we're revamping, we're finally recognizing our platinum members, and the change that they made is they were like making the card prettier, and that was it. Give them finally the recognition they deserve, and it was like a heavier card. Oh, Qatar Airways.
Any additional thoughts on Virgin Atlantic? I can't tell if
Uh,
we're being trolled at this point or
I mean, wasn't the deadline for something supposed to be May 31st? So I feel like something's going to happen in the next few days. I feel like they'll, well, who knows? But it's supposed to be, I heard, late May. So I feel like, or apparently they were going to be out of money by late May. So
yeah. Yeah. Speaking of late May, and let's see if anybody else has some like routes that you want us to look at or just confirm understanding on, we can do that because that worked pretty well. Um, in the meantime, there's like things that you should do because today is the last day of May, right? So, like Amex credits, have you paid your phone bill or someone else's?
yes, though I'm not sure the streaming credit, that's the tricky part.
So the streaming, oh, this is fun. So
Oh,
I know this thanks to Gil. So the streaming credit, Google Fi, if you're like me and have Google Fi, it counts as the streaming credit, not as the wireless credit. So shuffle your cards appropriately. Other things that count as streaming are like Apple Music and Spotify or YouTube Premium, which I have and is amazing because then you don't get ads on YouTube. Or Gil bought like a sticker in one of these chats a while ago, and he's like, "Hey, I got reimbursed from Amex. It counted as a streaming credit." So you have that as an option too. Um, so I think that's the streaming. What are the other ones that end in other things that end in May that people should be like, "Oh, they're going out and about"?
today is the last day to, if you're a JetBlue Mosaic member, to nominate someone as a Mosaic member as well, which we just did this morning. Then there is what else is end of May? I mean, there's not that much last day to buy Advantage miles for some overpriced amount.
Right. Don't do that. Buy Alaska miles instead, or just don't buy miles.
Oh, it is the last day also for Alaska, yes.
But I think there's also things like you can get, 5 times points on the Sapphire Reserve, and that's a monthly cap, right? So you could max that out today at your local grocery store, get some gift cards in addition to your groceries. Um, oh man. Okay, Ben, how would you get to Paro? How did you do this? Fly with miles
Sapporo,
to a
Bhutan.
city, five by Druk Air, or what would you do anything different from what you did, or how would you get to Bhutan in general?
Yeah, so to get to Bhutan, you either have to fly Druk Air, or there is I think there's a second airline they have now there. But they fly from nearby cities. So what we did when we went is we flew into Kathmandu, visited Nepal for a few days, and on the way back we returned. We flew from Paro back to Dhaka, Bangladesh, and we spent one night there before returning on Kuwait Airways to New York. So that was an exciting way to get back. What I do differently, I liked how short, whether you're going to Kathmandu or Dhaka, they're very, very short flights, so that's convenient. I don't know if I would do anything differently. I didn't particularly love Kathmandu. I know Nepal has a lot to offer. I know it's gorgeous, the scenery, but as a city destination for a couple of days, I didn't think it was the most inspiring place. So I'm not sure I would necessarily return in that way unless I were going to go out and explore more of the landscape, because obviously it's a gorgeous country otherwise. So I might try to go to a bigger city. I know they also fly to Bangkok, and I think a couple of other cities in Southeast Asia. So For some, it might make sense to combine it with whether that's a resort vacation there or visiting a city. So I think I don't regret it. I'm happy I got to see Dhaka for one night. I'm happy I spent a few days in Kathmandu, but I'm not sure I would necessarily recommend either of those unless you have a very specific desire to see them. So I would go via one of the other gateways maybe. But otherwise, loved it. The meridians there are good bases from which to explore. And a very cool country. Highly recommend also because it's like you spend all your time outdoors hiking. So it's a fantastic place if they, I don't know their status with allowing tourists or how they've handled it. So don't quote me on it, but I would feel comfortable there in terms of the fact that you can spend most of your time outdoors. And, we did literally almost nothing inside. Like,
Right.
so that
It's
was,
also a situation where the tourism is already highly regulated and integrated with the government and security arrangements. So it's not a real big stretch to be like, oh, and here are our COVID things, right? You had to have a government guide with you
yeah,
whenever you weren't in the hotel, basically.
they restrict you heavily. And so it's everybody gets a tour guide. So it's very regulated.
So to your
And
point of
not,
like going to dinner was just bizarre, like it wouldn't really be bizarre in a
right.
place like that because it was already bizarre that you were attended the entire time.
Exactly. Yes. And bring cash to Bhutan. That's true. Dollars are fine. Most ATMs do not work for US cards. All of that is true as well. A very cool, very strange place, Bhutan, because it's, they say it's the happiest place on earth. And like it is surreal because it's not at all, but it almost seems North Korea-esque in terms of like everything is so perfect based on what I've heard of people doing tours of North Korea where, the school children just happen to be dancing and singing, except it seems to be a little more authentic in
A little more
Bhutan. Like,
genuine.
yeah, I mean, it is very strange because there's nowhere. It's almost as much of a culture shock in a very different way than Japan, for example, where you go and you're just like, oh my goodness, life is so different here. But Bhutan, it's like everybody just drops off senior citizens and they just like hang out and play games all day and this, and then they pick them up in the afternoon and like, wow, seems nice. It's just all
Yeah, a little better.
yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's a. Uh,
Just to answer this really quickly, how do you feel about Legacy Starward credit card earning power being downgraded versus using some other card? I mean, I can answer this. I haven't spent a dime on any Bonvoy card, personal, business, or the Ritz card in 2 years.
yeah, there's no reason to. I mean, there are much better cards, especially nowadays when you think about other cards have been elevated. If you have the City Double Cash, you earn 2 times like transferable points in conjunction with another card. That like so far from competing versus earning, the Marriott Bonvoy points when they were divided by 3. The SPG Amex or any version thereof now just isn't worth it anymore, in my opinion. It's worth having for the free night certificate, but not worth spending money on. So
Yeah, for sure. Okay, this is fun. How would you go from Bali to Toronto in early January? I'm assuming this person is either started in Indonesia or already figured out their way there.
Bali to
Early
Toronto,
Jan, are we talking early January,
January
like
2nd,
before January 6th? Because that's not happening.
or maybe now it
Or
is
until
because
last minute. Like that's
yeah,
something like I would just book it on January 4th. I would plan on booking it January 4th. But that can really stress people out. Like it ruins their vacations looking for a board space the whole time.
yeah. I mean, maybe Cathay Pacific will have space open up through Hong Kong or Korean Air if you have SkyPass miles, but I realize most people don't because that's not a thing. Um, yeah, Star Alliance has some good options. Sometimes Eva Air might have something, but usually like 60 days out at most. What else is
And
there?
where would you start looking? Would you just like start on United and work your way back?
I will start on United.com because I think for Star Alliance it's the best search tool in terms of the calendar function they have. I probably wouldn't book through that. Aeroplan usually has better pricing depending on the partner,
Yeah.
but I would start there. If there's nothing amazing there, then I might go to AA.com because they'll show Cathay Pacific space, but with all their married segment logic, sort of. And then from there, well, from Bali, yeah, I mean, and then you can use Delta's website. Maybe you'll be lucky, and China Airlines
Right. I was
has.
actually thinking of that. The thing is with China Airlines and space on Delta, Delta won't show the connections through Taipei. And So you'd have to search like Bali to Taipei and book that and then call in to add in the second segment, but they don't fly to Toronto. So you'd have to go, right? I think they go to New York,
Which airline?
China Airlines. They go to
Ye-
Vancouver.
Yeah, I don't think they do Toronto. I think you're right.
Yeah, they go to Vancouver. So you could go to Vancouver and then buy a ticket, but like at that point, you're paying as much for your domestic Canadian ticket as anything else. But I think they do
Also
fly
look at
to New York. So I would maybe look at that.
yeah, I was thinking January 4th. That is a little bit challenging, maybe, but you never know. I mean, I feel like it's a very strange year all around. So maybe you'll luck out if you have flexibility across alliances and if you have transferable points. So
Yeah, these tickets between like January 1st and let's say January 10th every year are one of those situations where it's better to be lucky than good. Like sometimes you'll find something, but you can't really plan on finding anything. Like so if you know you have to be back because you have kids in school or a work commitment, buying the return ticket makes a lot of sense. And sometimes these tickets are really inexpensive when you're starting outside the US. Especially like if you're in South Africa, Bali's actually a decent location for that. Like just look at how much is it to buy that one-way ticket back or a round trip ticket, for the following year or something like that. Um, or you can do like what we did. We went to Thailand with a group of 7 over New Year's, and I was like, I know that we're coming back, but I don't know when. So, starting January 1st, we need to make sure we're within driving distance of an international airport and we'll trickle out. So, we were able to get everybody, um, the people who had to get back, so 5 people, we were able to book tickets on December 31st for travel January 2nd through Hong Kong, Bangkok, Hong Kong, uh, I think San Francisco, and then back up to Spokane. And then Nick and I went to the Maldives because there was space, and it was like, why not? We don't have to be back.
how do they handle the uncertainty? Because I feel like the problem is for non-miles and points people that whole like, oh, we'll get you back. We just don't know what yet. They're like, WTF? That makes no.
I mean, my family is pretty chill about it because they know that this is how it goes. Like, you get to fly lie flat. It, costs you nothing. And the cost is that little bit of stress and uncertainty. So they're pretty good about it. There's not a lot of anxiety. When Heather and my niece were coming back from New Zealand this year, they were in Australia because Megan was studying abroad in Tasmania and they went to New Zealand. Sometimes this gets like it backfires on me because then like I had found something and booked something. And they're like, well, actually, we want to extend a couple days. Is that okay? And like, you can't say no when for like a decade they've just jumped and been like, whatever, we'll take whatever crazy flight. And like, we're going to the airport right now. So, it worked out. It was very stressful. Literally, they were, I gave them like, here, this is your flight number. And they were like, do we have a ticket? I was like, no, but this is your flight number, leaving from Christchurch. And you'll be on that flight and just waiting because it was obvious that space was going to open up. You know how this goes, right? You're like, it's completely empty, blah, blah, blah. It's like, by the time you get to the airport, you'll have a ticket. And they did.
Always a fun thing to explain to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And they were like, do you have our connecting tickets? And I was like, no, by the time you get to LA, I'll have tickets for you
Oh my
the rest of the
goodness.
way. Sorry. You changed the plan. So,
That's, that's some good questions here.
yeah. What are some good questions? I'll put them up if there's some that you see you want to
Well,
answer.
which first class would you choose? I mean, this is a 10-second answer from San Francisco to Tokyo, ANA or Japan Airlines. I am firmly, firmly on Team ANA new first class is number one. Number two is Japan Airlines first class. Number three is ANA old first class. So I will, and anybody who thinks ANA old first class is better than Japan Airlines first class, I have a serious issue with. So, not actually, but to me, there's no competition. But their new first is phenomenal. And then the other one was the Seattle to Tokyo. That's a good question, Robert. Seattle to Tokyo. Oh no, sorry. He asked that. He didn't ask the question. Sorry,
He
who
was
asked the
answering
question?
that because somebody else was asking about, hang on, I saw it, Pacific Northwest to Tokyo. That was Ben asking. Pacific Northwest
So
to
this is a
Tokyo.
very
There's lots of options, but what's the best value?
So that's an interesting one in terms of, because there's some really cool arbitrage opportunities here. These nonstop flights, you have Japan Airlines, you have ANA, and you have Delta. So Japan Airlines is a great deal through Alaska Mileage Plan, but Alaska Mileage Plan miles are also valuable versus if Virgin Atlantic Flying Club, if we decide in a week that they're definitely, that Virgin Atlantic's going to be okay, then this is a case where Virgin Atlantic Flying Club is by far the best deal because you could fly either Delta from Seattle to Tokyo, and they have Delta One suites at least most of the year, and that would be 120,000 round trip with virtually no fuel surcharges. And keep in mind, Flying Club, at least historically, there have often been transfer bonuses from Amex, Chase, and Citi. I can't guarantee we will see those again, but all the Virgin Atlantic miles I've acquired basically have been with a 30 or 25% transfer bonus, so that makes the value much better. Or you could book ANA round trip business class Seattle Tokyo for, is it 90 or 95,000, which is a phenomenal deal as well.
I don't know. I think
95,
it's 90.
I think.
I
And
write
fuel
these things
surcharges are low.
down so that I don't have to remember them.
So ironically, Virgin Atlantic Flying Club miles are the single best currency for getting between Seattle and Tokyo, but don't transfer points until you're ready to book.
Yeah. But if you also have United miles, that can be a good option because Japan is its own zone for United.
60
So
something or
yeah, so it's not like American has Asia 1 and Asia 2, and Asia 1 is like Japan, South Korea, and
yes.
China. But for United, for just historical reasons, I think of the route network with Continental and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Japan is its own region. So there are some interesting opportunities there. And you also have the potential to do like an excursionist perk and go somewhere else within Asia because you're in multiple regions then.
Yep. Oh, that's
Okay, this is Ben's favorite game. How do you determine if space is going to open up? If you see like J9, C9, D9, I9
yep.
on expert flight or close to departure, is that how you go about it? Or like, what do you do?
So this is determining when a word space will open up is such a satisfying game. The problem is so there's no one size fits all answer. So what you have to understand first of all is the policies vary by airline in terms of some airlines, every first class seat could be open and they still won't make it available on miles. Similarly, there are some outside factors like time of year, day of week. They have different projections as to how many seats they'll sell. So for example, if there are 5 first class seats left, their willingness to make those award seats will be different on a Thursday afternoon when it's peak travel time rather than, on a Tuesday or Wednesday. Obviously, it depends on the route. But in general, my approach, or actually, let's step back for a second. This used to be the most fun game in the world with Lufthansa first class because Lufthansa had 8 first class seats and they make first class award seats available to partner airlines at most 15 days out. And it was so satisfying and so fun to be able to guess not only if they would open the space, but when they would. And at some point it became, so this is the perfect example because there are 8 seats. So you can see in advance how many seats are for sale. So you notice, okay, Lufthansa, they open up seats at most 15 days out. And then you look both at the number of seats for sale. So for example, if it's F5, that means there are 5 first class seats left for sale and therefore they've sold 3 seats. So each airline will have a different policy as to how far they'll go. In the case of Lufthansa back in the day, or even Cathay Pacific, it was typically that up until about 24 hours before, they would make, or at 24 hours or so, they'll make all but 1 or 2 first-class seats available. So, they'd sometimes do it further out than that. But my general approach is look at the patterns prior to your travel date. So when they open up seats, so if you're trying to fly, for example, from Chicago to Frankfurt on Lufthansa in first class, and if you're going in a month, I would look at, okay, how many seats are for sale then? And then let me say, okay, I know they start opening seats at most 15 days out. So let me start looking 15 days from today. How many seats are for sale? Do they have a word space or not? And then I would keep tracking that flight and say, okay, well, they ended up opening it up 10 days out with 5 seats left for sale. How does that compare? Now, this is slightly different. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I would just say also as part of doing that, like if you're looking at this, I would also look at different markets because we know that Chicago to Frankfurt is a route where they're good about releasing space historically, but other routes may not be the same way. And so sort of look at that, especially if like I'm in Spokane, there's no international flights here. And you'd think like, oh, it's best to go to wherever, but like I can do Denver or Chicago or San Francisco in one stop. So look at a couple of options is typically ideal.
Yeah, especially there's some markets where they almost never release space. So LA or San Francisco for Lufthansa, for example, extremely tough versus Detroit or Washington or Chicago or Philadelphia are usually pretty good depending on the planes they're operating. But there's certain hubs that have more space than others. Now, it gets trickier, though, if we're talking about business class, because there could be 60 seats. So airlines will show at most 9 seats in a fare class. So that would show as J9, for example. So that doesn't tell you, are there 9 seats left or are there 50 seats left? Because either way, it's going to say 9. So what I look at there is, first of all, the seat map. That's not always an accurate indicator, especially on airlines that charge to assign seats like Lufthansa, like British Airways, excuse me. And then number 2 is how many of the cheaper buckets are available. So for example, in business class, it could be that there's the fare bucket J, C, D, I, Z. It depends on the airline. So are they willing to sell 9 in all of them? Because that suggests they're still willing to sell cheap fares, so therefore they don't think it's going to be full. Versus it could be that it's J7, which is the highest business class fare bucket for some airlines, and everything else is 0. And that suggests, okay, they're pretty close to maxing out their sales. So that's
lots of nuance. So it's not like a short answer, but there's a lot of ways to sort of break it up and look at it. And I think knowing specifically what you're wanting to do helps, because then you can sort of dig in and tease it apart, like Sudoku almost, right? Where you're like, let me just look at this, look at this, look at this. So let's, Louis is wondering about doing like New York to Bangkok. Best first class available is about 300,000 Amex points, but it would be for his honeymoon next year, fall of 2021. So there's time to accrue more points. It's like, what would you do? How would you go about it?
Amex points.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first class.
It's a honeymoon.
So the first thing, so business might be the only realistic option. We'll see. So the first thing I think about is, okay, which airlines to Asia release 2 first class seats in advance? Cathay Pacific Asia Miles sometimes, very rarely, but through their program has 2 first class seats, while they don't release those generally to partners. What other worthwhile first class product is there? Singapore, not really. Air China, that's not really first class.
Singapore is a good option only because you can get points from multiple programs, and that might be easier. Right. And and they allow, there's more, inventory using their own points, and you can waitlist. The waitlist isn't as great as it used to be.
No.
But you still have sort of that as an option.
I would be looking for Amex points, that's not great, but whatever. But Japan Airlines first class, they actually often have 2 first class seats. Mm-hmm. And that you could book through Alaska or American, or ANA first class. If you're going next year, they are sometimes making, though there's going to be the Olympics. So if it's over summer, that's unlikely to happen if the Olympics go on.
Right. Okay. So, but something sort of the strategy I would probably take here, going to what you just said, Ben, like I would look at JAL first, and you can accrue some Alaska miles or some American miles pretty quickly, especially if there's 2 of you. Like that's not very many credit card applications or even buying very many points. Mm-hmm. To be able to book that for the one way.
Yep.
And then flights out of Bangkok are sometimes really inexpensive. So going Bangkok, you could even look at like Bangkok, Doha, JFK, and buy the ticket using the Amex portal, reimburse yourself with the points, especially if you have the business platinum.
So that's, Louis also says, was even thinking about flying to London Heathrow and then booking new Singapore suites from there to Singapore, because sometimes there is in the new suites availability London to Singapore, and this all comes down to how crazy you're willing to get with travel. So like I have found there are often things that sound really fun, like for example back in the day when you could do aeroplane mini around the world trips and go to Tokyo via Europe and then Southeast Asia and then all that, and that sounds nice. Whether or not that's how you want to spend your honeymoon, or wait, was this a honeymoon?
Yeah, it's a honeymoon. So I think that this is actually, and I feel like Ben and I sort of have learned this the hard way. Your spouse probably doesn't care about the product as much as they care about the routing. So you guys should have that conversation, because when I bring up anything, any trip, like, hey, Nick, do you want to go to blah, blah, blah? He will look at me. Ever since we did that trip to Argentina, he'll look at me, he'll say, from where and how? Because like, so this whole plan of like New York to London, that's an awful flight. It's like 6 hours just so you can fly the Singapore suite from London to Singapore. Like, are you going to spend time in London, or are you just going to have a long layover? And then you're in Singapore. Are you spending time in Singapore and then you're connecting to Bangkok? And if so, like, why? If like, are you going to the beaches in Thailand, or you're just going to Bangkok? Like Bangkok isn't really a honeymoon destination necessarily.
And on top of that, let's see
I
how.
would have that conversation because that's a lot of potential disruption. That's a lot of segments. And none of those aircraft are nice enough to warrant having a fight halfway through on your honeymoon. Right? Like it's just
That's
they're
true.
not. Like there's, so a one-stop business class routing maybe seems better.
Well, and I think more so than ever before with the uncertainty right now, I think there's something to be said for going as direct as possible and avoiding as many potential border challenges as possible because we don't know what transit rules will be. If the soft product isn't as great as it used to be, you're probably not going to be as happy flying for 48 hours if you don't need to. So um, hopefully there will be a day again where flying endlessly sounds very fun, but with masks and everything, maybe that time isn't now or next year. We'll see. Uh,
Um, any tricks or insights on getting Air New Zealand business class seats?
yes, at most 60 days out or so, sometimes within 30 days. Like they have done a reasonably good job releasing award seats to partner airlines at that point. If you do book it, book through Virgin Atlantic Flying Club with the asterisk that, assuming the program goes back to normal, very good deal, one way, cheaper than virtually any other program. But you have to book within 60 days. And then there was also one about, is it why harder to get approved for credit cards? What was
Yeah,
the
yeah, we should answer that. And if there's somebody who's chiming in who works for a card issuer, which is what I love about our audience, that there's always someone who's a legitimate expert in anything. But let me find the question. But if you want to go ahead and we can talk about this, like, are you more or less likely to get a credit card approval during the current situation, or has nothing changed? I mean, things have definitely changed. And I know, Ben, like the last week in March, you were like, if you're going to get a credit card, you should get one now. And a lot of people basically lost their shit because they've said you were shilling and being ridiculous.
But it's
I know.
true. But it's
Right,
true.
but
They
the
have
reality is
card issuers across the board have largely gotten stricter when it comes to approving people, even people with good credit. Tiffany, didn't you just get denied for? Sorry, am I outing your denial here? But you have a
yeah,
very good
no, it's
credit
fine.
score.
Yeah, I have a great credit score and I'm not crazy with credit cards like a lot of y'all. My last card that I got was the Bank of America Virgin Atlantic in December. So I've had 3 inquiries in the past 18 months and instant denial for a card that does not even require excellent credit. Um, and like my credit's well over 800 and all of that is good utilization as well. Like it's an ideal profile. But I know from one issuer, like I've been told by one issuer that they have tightened their underwriting on consumer cards by 40%. Um, and so something like that, like wouldn't have otherwise had trouble, but like for whatever reason, they're not keen on that. We've seen some card issuers, like in order to get a Chase business card, you need to be already have an existing relationship with Chase and be logged into your account right now. They've shut down all their referral links and things like that. What are some of the other things that we've seen?
I mean, some credit issuers are now closing credit cards that are inactive because there's liability associated with having all these risk associated with it. So I think we've seen Chase and Barclays in some cases have either told people to spend or have just reduced their credit line. So they want to reduce their exposure. It's understandable, and I imagine a lot of this is going to be relatively temporary measure. For credit card issuers, this uncertainty is terrible. In many ways, a recession, if that's what it were, is not always terrible because they also do make money through credit card financing, or through people.
Right.
Yeah, but
I think that's a really good way to think about it. Like if you are an underwriter or you're writing an algorithm for determining credit scores, the idea is that you would assign weights to all these different variables. Like what is their chance of being able to pay it back and like what is their history and blah, blah, blah. But right now it's almost like you actually can't fill in any of the numbers for that algorithm because someone's past ability to pay may not reflect their current situation at all. Like I'm sure we're not the only business where the revenue is like a fraction of what it would have been before.
yeah.
And if you're a card issuer, you don't necessarily know that. Like you don't have visibility into, okay, this is what your income or revenue was before, but what is your COVID revenue? Even who are the mortgage people, Ben? the big federal people who buy the loans, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac
Oh,
people.
okay.
So they issued guidance on Friday telling banks that, like, hey, if you are going to write a loan for a self-employed person, like, this is all the additional documentation that you need for a mortgage, because you actually can't look at last year's tax return. You can't look at their Q1 filings. You need to get an up-to-date audited P&L, because everyone's income profiles are different and everyone's debt profiles are different. So I think there's a lot of that too. Like, why would you issue debt in those situations?
Esteban Escobar asked I feel like the Virgin Atlantic question that is maybe just worth addressing. You mentioned something about Virgin Atlantic Flying Club miles being uncertain. I canceled ANA business class with Virgin Atlantic because of COVID. Are those miles safe for now? Should I rebook ASAP? Does it matter? Tiffany, do you want to throw in a link to the what happens to miles if airline goes bankrupt post?
Yeah, let me.
So the short answer is, hopefully Virgin Atlantic will stay in business, including Flying Club. If that happens, everything will be fine either way. In the event that both the airline and the frequent flyer program liquidate, which seems unlikely to me, then expect your ticket won't be honored either way, even if you booked on a partner airline. So there's no rush in rebooking. So I'd say hope for the best. Virgin Atlantic should stay in business. Hopefully they do. If they don't, and if you're traveling in the future, it doesn't matter whether you booked a ticket or whether the miles are just in your account. It's unlikely they'll honor the ticket. But I don't personally think that's terribly likely, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, what we've been telling people who have a lot of ANA or a lot of Virgin miles and are concerned, is like, book the award that Ben was mentioning earlier, like a Seattle to Tokyo on Delta, or book something domestic on Delta. Like, Delta does have a big stake, and there's no guarantee, but I feel like if you have a Virgin Atlantic issued ticket on ANA and a Virgin Atlantic ticket issued on Delta, and Virgin Atlantic goes bankrupt and has not paid for either of those tickets, your odds are better that Delta will be like, you can still fly us, it's fine.
That's true. Yep.
But that's just my gut. There's no science or data or guarantees or anything else.
Yes. Any other last?
We're talking about credit cards now. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are seeing different things in terms of credit card approvals and things like that. That's not really unexpected.
No, I mean, some issuers seem to be tougher on business apps. Some seem to be tougher on personal apps. Or I don't know if it's just that the business departments haven't gotten the memo, because we certainly noticed, at least at a couple of issuers, that business cards are strangely easier to be approved for than personal cards. So I don't know what the logic is there, because it seems
it may just be that might just be our experience too, right? Like, with certain issuers, right?
Yes.
That's the other thing, is some issuers have different underwriting standards for business versus personal. And in some cases, like with American Express, it's actually a completely separate bank that underwrites the business cards and the personal cards. So it's almost like you could have two completely different standards in those cases. Best Alaska Airlines credit card, any of the Visa signatures, right? Business or the personal.
Yeah. They only have one personal, one business Visa signature. You want that. You don't want the downgraded version, because that doesn't get you the companion certificate. But either of those are good.
Yeah. So
goodness, time
awesome.
flew
We made
by.
it through an hour.
That was a while. Didn't feel that long, but
yeah, no, that didn't feel that long at all.
Thank you guys for joining us very much. I would say have a nice, just hang in there. Whatever is a nice distraction, at least, so that's good.
Yeah, it was. Maybe we'll do more of this. I liked having you screen share, so maybe we'll do more of that. And we will see you guys on the blog and on Thursday for happy hour.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.